I do see that you're still on mute.
Yeah, I can come on unmuted if now it works.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure we were all set up. So we're going to engage in about 30 minutes or so of some dialogue and discussion. We've had some questions that we put together so that we can get Monica and Lauren and Ben's feedback. After our time together with our discussion, we will open it up for some Q&A from our viewers. There is a button at the bottom of your window for Q&A. So Mike and I will keep an eye on your questions as they roll in. Please answer them as you think of them, and we'll definitely dedicate time to going over them together as best as we can. And so with that, I just want to go ahead and get started. So we were all thrown into the coronavirus pandemic together about 15 weeks ago now, and a lot of changes and adjustments had to be made for our personal lives, our professional lives, and at the end of the day, I think it was, a realization for a number of attorneys that the law has to go on. So you guys have all decided to take positions despite the remote orders and exercise some options using some remote platforms. So the first question that I thought would be really good for our viewers is, what software did you decide to use, and what were some of the reasons that so that you came to that determination? Monica and Lauren, I think you both utilize Zoom, that platform that we're all in today. That's a good start. If you could go ahead and let us know your thought process and how you came.
I'll start, Monica, if that's all right. Absolutely. So in taking the depositions via video conference in the past couple of weeks, I used this software, Zoom. I felt comfortable with it. My firm started using it to have morning conferences, which was nice. And then when I contacted Aptus to get the ball rolling on the video conference depositions, this was the first recommendation that they threw out there. So we just kind of rolled with it, and Aptus helped get myself and counsel, as well as the third-party witnesses, registered on Zoom and then set up and had some trial runs, which was helpful before the depositions got started.
Great. How about Monica? What was your thought?
Sorry, Jaclyn, you're cutting out a little bit for me. I don't know if it's easier for you to repeat the question or just type it in the chat.
Sure. No, I could actually. I'll step in and repeat for her. Yeah, we're just talking about what's been your experience thus far with taking remote depositions. How's it gone for you?
It was easier than expected for me. There were a couple issues just with the defending attorney, just remembering to mute themselves, except for when they're objecting. And even when the audio did cut out for the witness answering my questions, the court reporter would actually be the one to step in and ask them to repeat themselves before I had to. So it was pretty easy. I think as long as you have your exhibits ready to go and all the pets are out of the room and well fed, should be fine.
Sure. Yeah, that's one of the things we're noticing when you're working in a remote environment. You do have to take in consideration some of those other things, like pets in the room or even children in the room sometimes. So glad things were able to go smoothly for you thus far in that route. And Ben, how about you? Can you talk a little bit about your experiences and what you've liked and maybe some of the challenges you've encountered?
Yeah, that's, I think everything that Monica and Lauren said were accurate. I went with a different platform, a different video platform called Live Litigation. And I had done some research in advance to kind of see the different platforms. And my interest was, I was looking around at my team and tried to figure out what would satisfy the interests of the least technologically savvy person there. And so for me, I use Live Litigation because it had all of the functions in one platform. So it had kind of the multi-video Zoom type of function, but it also allowed me to show documents and to control the documents so I could point the witness to exactly where I wanted them to look. In a deposition that's not very document intensive, I wouldn't have a problem using Zoom, but especially most of the depositions I've taken so far have been third-party depositions. So it's been a little bit harder to come to stipulations, and we needed to make sure that we could basically allow the witness to just click on a link and that we could do everything else. Unlike a typical or a pre-corona video deposition where they're coming into a video conference room somewhere else and I'm in my video conference room and I can send a binder of exhibits and we can all be on the same page. This is a situation where there are people calling in, the reporters calling in from their house, the defense attorneys calling in from their house, the witnesses' attorneys calling in from their house, the witnesses calling in. And so we needed a central place that would allow somebody who had no tech capabilities to join. And, you know, everyone has to get trained on the software. And it's not that the problems are different than what Monica and Lauren described. You know, there are always those interruptions, but, you know, I found that everybody is relatively understanding, because if you're in a point of the case where you're taking depositions, the other side is probably also taking depositions. And so we try to give everybody as much leeway as possible. But at the end of the day, well, I guess it's at the beginning of the day. What do you need out of the software? And try to find the platform that gives that to you.
I guess I'm going to throw this question back to all three of you. And Ben, you just mentioned, you know, a good point. What do you need the software to do? And obviously critically important there, but how much you factor in, okay, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do that, but how much you factor in terms of, okay, oh, is a witness going to be able to do it on their end? I could do it on my end, but how is the witness going to do this? What's the learning curve for the witness? Is that kind of something you also take into account on the front end or the back end of when you're trying to prepare for these depositions? And I guess Lauren, will go back and start with you first.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely something that I took into consideration. The 5 depositions that I've conducted in the last couple of weeks via video conference have been of minors. So it's actually been helpful in that minors are generally pretty tech savvy. In fact, they've taught me some stuff in the last, couple depos about this whole video conference thing. So I think knowing the capabilities of your witness, opposing counsel, all of that is something to get ahead of. I sent out an email to opposing counsel first to get an agreement that everyone was comfortable moving forward with the video conference depositions, but then also to confirm that, the software was downloaded. And again, I think that was really helpful when Ryan from Aptus stepped in and sent out the link to everyone and spent 3 minutes ahead of time of the deposition, just ensuring that everyone's link worked and that they were able to access the conference and all questions were answered before we got going. And it was nice to have 5 minutes before the depo started or so, just to make sure that everyone was comfortable with it. And it worked pretty well with all of the minors that I deposed.
And Monica, how about you?
So for me, I think that one thing that really changed the mind of opposing counsel and moving forward with the Zoom depos was them being able to do a demo. My depositions were on a Monday, and I think even the week before we were undecided if we were going to have the depositions moving forward. And I obviously wanted them to go forward because we didn't want to delay our cases anymore. So many of them have already been delayed. But they seemed to be on the fence. So it was nice of the Aptus rep that I was working with to actually reach out to them and ask if they wanted to schedule a demo. And we ended up doing that. I think it was the Friday or Saturday just before the depositions on Monday. And it was quick. It was just 5 minutes. And Zoom is pretty simple in that there aren't too many buttons, aren't too many functions, at least not that many functions that you would use during a plaintiff's deposition. So I think that really pushed them over the edge, them just seeing how easy it was for me to be able to share my screen if I did want to show exhibits. So I think that the demo is a must for people who aren't really too sure about whether or not video depositions are what they want to do.
I agree with that. It's been when they've come in at the beginning, they're very hesitant. It's like, okay, let's show you what we're going to look at. And like you said, once you show them that demo and show them the process, visually being able to see that, it's like, okay, they become a little bit more receptive to doing it and cooperate a little more. And Ben, how about you to kind of wrap up this point here?
Yeah, I agree with Monica and Lauren again. The demo is key, especially if you're taking the deposition, to make sure you have control over the software and what you want to do. But I would back it up a little bit. Mike, you had asked originally about, how to prepare where at the witness's level of technological savvy. I don't think that's any different from a normal deposition. It's different from a deposition prep, but it's not something you would be doing, you wouldn't be doing in a normal deposition prep. So if I'm going in person, I'm going to already have been planning my questions and kind of the question flow and the document flow and how I think the witness is going to answer questions. It's the same thing here. It's just an added layer on top. So in general, for a live deposition, I have much more experience preparing for those. And so a lot of it comes second nature. Whereas a remote deposition, it takes a little bit more preparation because it's new and you need to understand how the remote is going to make certain things harder and certain things easier, and how you're going to be able to communicate with the witness and their lawyers during the deposition. But I don't think, personally, I think that's something you would be doing anyway. It's just you're more used to it in the live context. And video context, that's what attending the demo is, doing a practice round, checking out the room before and making sure that all the lawyers have the links and that their clients have Wi-Fi and are capable of joining. It's a different kind of prep, but it's similar prep to what you would be doing for a live deposition.
And again, Ben, I just had a question come in the Q&A. Just to kind of a quick recap. So Lauren and Monica were using the Zoom platform to conduct their depositions, and Ben, you were using live litigation. We just had a question on that. So I'll kind of knock that out of the queue there. And then it looks like we have Jaclyn back. Thanks for coming back, Jaclyn, and making some quick changes on the fly.
Hi.
I'll give it back to you now. Sorry to steal your thunder. Thanks for letting me start.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Because of the audio difficulties, it's nice to have someone like Mike serving as tech and making sure that everyone's connections are up and running. So I think that all of you guys utilize a similar service during your remote depositions, at least probably for the first one. But I want to kind of go back to some of the considerations that you might have made. Lauren, you had mentioned that you had some minor witnesses that you were looking to depose. What other considerations did you make, or did you kind of factor into deciding that this is the right case and these were the right witnesses to proceed with a remote deposition?
Sure. I think, in getting with my litigation team and my partner, we really discussed which cases we should move forward with the video conference depositions versus which ones we shouldn't, and things that we considered were we didn't want to take any, we shied away unless we needed to. If we could back burner, continue plaintiff's depositions, we did. For depositions, we decided to take the 5 minor depositions in the last couple of weeks because it was really easy to knock them out back to back. So we had a couple set up for each day. The minors didn't have to travel. It was kind of nice also because we knew that the witnesses were sitting at home with nothing to do. They're not working. They're not in school. Hopefully online schooling is happening, but if you can cut out travel time, that was really helpful to just be writing a brief at noon and hop on to the depot at 12:30 and just get rolling. Other things that we consider.
Yeah. That's great. And Ben, I know one of your witnesses was in Massachusetts, right? So I'm sure travel considerations were made for sure, but what else, what other factors did you consider before deciding to move forward?
Well, I mean, there's a basic factor, which is we are the plaintiffs in our case, and the discovery schedule is to close the end of April. And so there's a choice to be made in the case about whether you're just going to put a pin in all of discovery or whether you're going to continue to move forward. And I think, joint working with the opposing counsel, the common interest was to attempt to move the case forward as much as possible. And, we're still discussing that, but I don't think we always have the choice to not move the case forward, especially if you're in the middle of litigation or at the end of discovery. The court deadlines are scheduled, and of course you could go to the court and ask to move the deadlines back. Right now, there's, unless anyone on this in this webinar knows something I don't know, there's no firm end date. We don't know we don't know how long this is going to be going, and so it'd be one thing to say let's hold off for 3 weeks when we know it's going to be back to normal, but that's just not the case anyone is in. And so moving the case ahead is important to the case, it's important to the client, it's important to the judge. And so, I wouldn't say we really had a decision in that capacity.
Yeah, that's good input for sure. So once you have decided to move forward with your depositions, you've selected the platform that you're going to use. How did you handle introducing exhibits? Obviously, all parties are remote, all attendees are remote in these sorts of situations. So Ben, how did you handle it with live litigation? And Monica, how did you handle it using Zoom? Ben, if you want to go ahead and start.
Sure, I'll briefly. Like I said, live litigation has everything in the same platform. And so, that platform has a certain way to mark exhibits and a certain way to upload exhibits and way to share it. And so once we decided the platform, we would practice and we would, prepare as much as possible to try to make the uses as seamless as possible. There are other platforms, for example, that separate out the video and the documents. eDepose is the one that is probably the most popular or maybe the most expensive. I don't quite know that, but that's a different platform that allows document uses, and it's very functional. But in order to use it, the witness is going to need to have open 2 windows, as far as I understand it. They're going to need the Zoom window open and the deposition window. And I'm not confident that any witness has 2 screens at their home, or if they can split their screen to use documents or not. And so, generally, it's just getting familiarity with the platform once you've decided what the platform is using, and then trying to tailor your outline and your questioning around what you were able to be doing in the platform. But again, I think that's exactly what I would be doing in a normal deposition. I would just be in the room with paper instead of at home with PDFs.
And Monica, how about you? How did you handle exhibits using Zoom?
So for Zoom, I think that originally you were able to send exhibits through to, I think, their chat system, but I think they disabled that for security reasons right before I was going to take my depo. So when I did the demo with the Aptus rep, we went through just screen sharing, and that was really easy. One thing that I was kind of concerned about is because I had multiple exhibits and I was going to have them open in one kind of Adobe tab, well, not tab, but one window with all the tabs at the top. I made sure to rename my exhibits, just boring things like Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3, and have them all in order, because I didn't want the witnesses to get distracted once I shared my screen with, the names of the other exhibits that I had them named in our case file. So I just made sure to have them in order. One thing that's really nice with Zoom is they can see where your cursor is. So even if you don't want to use the annotation tools to highlight something or underline something, you can just point your cursor and say, do you see right here where it says this? And they'll say yes. One thing about the screen sharing through Zoom, I think once you screen share, it takes away like my video and replaces it. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, is they can't see you at the same time you're screen sharing whatever document you have up. And, of course, just make sure you have everything else on your desktop put away, because they will see your whole screen unless you select a certain part of it. But I just sent my exhibits to the court reporter, I think a couple of days before. It wasn't difficult at all.
Jaclyn, if I could hop in here real quick. We have a couple of questions I want to address through the Q&A, but something else I want to bring up real quick from Monica's point. Of course, after you took your deposition, they re-enabled all those features within the chat, so you could you can file back and forth. So that is fully functional now. But the other thing you were talking about with screen sharing and how we're getting the documents to the opposing counsel and to the client during the deposition. Have any of you had to send paper documents or exhibits, not only to Aptus, but to the witness and opposing counsel ahead of time? Have any of you done that? I see a shake of the head from Ben. Ben, can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, this was not a deposition. I was deposition my colleague took, but this was a deposition in which there were very large Excel sheets, and one of the negative functions of one of the things that live litigation is not good at is that it only allows PDFs and JPEGs or something else. So you can't upload an Excel sheet into live litigation like you could. You could use that either on a screen share function or an eDepose. So we had to work around that and try to isolate whatever function, whatever parts of the document we could upload in PDF. But in case we weren't able to communicate or effectively do what we needed to do, we sent the other side copies of the natively produced Excel files and said, in case we're not able to do what we need to do in this video, we're going to send these to you, ask you to hold them and send them to your witness. And luckily, this is a situation in which these are Excel sheets that the witness had created. So we were asking them about their own product. And so it wasn't, so they would understand what it was when they got it. But, you know, other than that, we've been able to effectively use live litigation because we can convert most things that we want to use into PDFs.
Sure. The next question I have is, I'm happy to open it up to all of you, but obviously the benefit of in-person depositions, particularly when you're taking them, is that you get to decide where you want to take it for the most part within certain geographic constraints. But so in a setting like this, where you have to use a virtual conference room, how do you feel you were able to continue to kind of control the room and also read some of the other attendees, particularly the witness, other people that were speaking during the deposition? And then, Ben, if you want to start with that.
Sure. Obviously, if you're not in the room, there are certain things that you can't, certain information inputs that you don't get. You know, obviously you can't smell the person. That's not important in a deposition, but their personal space, how they sit, how they engage, how they answer questions is very important. What I have found is most of that stuff you can get a sense of in video. And I think it's a fair debate about whether it's better in person or better over video. But you're basically sitting with the person, especially if it's a longer deposition, for a while, and you'll get a sense of how they respond. Now, whether them sitting at home with their dog next to them in their work chair is an effective predictor of what they're going to be like sitting in trial in front of a jury next to a judge, I don't know yet. That's something we'll have to see when our case goes to trial and see how predictive it was. But I think it's definitely fair that people don't want to do that. But I think probably some 70 to 85% of the information input that you'd get in a live deposition, you would also get through video. But you know, I think it's fair. If people disagree with me, I might agree with them too. I think that's an open discussion.
Well, Lauren and Monica, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have different experiences that you could share?
I agree. When I was taking the depositions, it really still felt like a normal deposition, that the witness was a bit nervous. I had a lot of like chair rotation that would normally occur, especially for minors or a nervous deponent in a normal actual conference room setting. And it felt like besides the fact that you can see yourself taking the deposition, which is a new experience, I felt like I was getting the cues from the deponent of their personality and how they're going to present. And I mean, and the deponents that I deposed were taking it seriously. I mean, they showed up on time. even minors were relatively well dressed like they would. I mean, they weren't sitting in their kitchen throwing potato chips back, acting like it was casual. So I felt like I could still get all of that and get a read on the witness.
And Monica, how about you?
I think it completely varies from witness to witness and whichever opposing counsel you have. For mine, I think the witnesses were very well behaved during the deposition. Unfortunately, the opposing counsel that I had, they would keep their video on and then just leave the video for several minutes at a time. So you were just looking at their chair or empty wall, and then they would, empty their dishwasher loudly at some point while I was asking questions. So I think there's a certain level of courtesy that needs to be maintained if you're in your own home space. And there's also the effect of the witnesses, their attorney isn't sitting in the same room defending them. So I'm not really sure what kind of effect that has on them, whether that makes them more or less nervous, and whether that helps or hurts their attorney trying to jump in and object when they don't have the ability to just put their arm out in front of them, as I see a lot of attorneys do, to get their objections in. So I think that it's similar to a real deposition in many ways, but you also have to be very conscious of your presence in your little window that's showing and how much noise you're making. And if you are going to get up and do something, just mute yourself, maybe even just step in and tell the court reporter that you have to do something real quick rather than make a big fuss or a bunch of racket in the background.
And with all parties attending, or with all attendees obviously in different locations and remote, even in our Zoom room right now, there's a few windows open. How easily were you able to identify the speaker? Obviously the witness you have a direct view of, and you're probably familiar with his or her voice, but what about if another attendee needed to make him or herself known, voice an objection or take a break? How easy was it for you guys to identify a speaker at any given time? Lauren, if you want to start with that.
It was fairly easy. Like you can all see with Zoom right now, the speaker is highlighted. So if someone interrupts, or makes a noise, the screen changes depending on your view. So you can do the speaker view, and then it's really apparent who's speaking. And then the view where you see all the squares, you can see the green around. And I mean, we were just all attentive. The court reporter was actually really helpful with this. If someone needed to step in, you could just raise hand, or generally we stipulated at the beginning, in addition to a couple other stipulations, that to be really intentional about taking your time, and it made the deposition go a lot faster. So question, pausing, and then answering. So we were really intentional about slowing the flow of it so that those objections could get in. And then also we agreed if an objection wasn't heard immediately and the witness started to answer, especially since it was a third-party witness for that deposition, that the objection could be inserted before the answer started in the transcript.
Great, and I'd like to get back to some of the admonitions that you said that you'd made in just a second. But Ben, when you and I spoke, you had shared your experience with going off the record and having to communicate with the videographer, who obviously wasn't in the same room as you. So can you share with all of us that experience and how you ensured that you were going off the record and then back on at exact moments that you wanted to do so?
Yeah, so I think that bridges really well to the last, to Lauren's discussion, because generally in a deposition, only one person from a party is going to be talking at a time. And since these are video and they're easier to attend, we're getting more attendees. So we have always asked that anyone not talking mute their video as well as their audio, which I think is a fair request. So the only people talking are there's only a couple of people talking. On the other hand, the videographer also mutes his video. And so sometimes like in a live deposition, there's sometimes nonverbal communication between the reporter and the videographer about when to end the record and when to turn off the video. And that is a lot harder in video because you can't clearly identify who you're looking at or who you're talking to. So I have the first couple depositions, it was a little unclear who was being talked. Like if I say, okay, should we go off the record? In a live deposition, to me, that would mean I'd like to go off the record and giving the other side an opportunity to respond if they didn't want to. But that in a video context, they don't know who I'm asking. Nobody knows quite what I'm asking. And so you need to be much clearer. I'm going to ask the videographer to stop the video and to go off the record right now. Because you need to communicate to the videographer who is probably watching the video, but may be running the video and not, watching everything that's going on, to bring their attention back and to stop the video. And same thing with the reported record. If you are asking the reporter to stop taking the record, it needs to be a direct request as opposed to a let's go off the record communication, which will sometimes be interpreted the way you want it and sometimes won't. So, little accommodations like that are something I think you get more used to as you take more, but I don't think any of those were fundamentally difficult. It led to some miscommunications and sometimes the record would go on longer, but everybody would stay until the videographer told us that we were off the record. It just took an extra couple steps.
Great. And to get back to Lauren, you had mentioned that you had made some additional admonitions and stipulations. I'd like to open that up to the rest of you. If you did make additional admonitions and stipulations in light of the fact that everybody is attending remotely, and if you could share with the viewers what those admonitions and stipulations were.
I'll just briefly, we haven't done a tremendous amount of specific admonitions. First, I had intended to ask the witness to turn off their phone, but due to the audio quality of some of the witnesses, that's not possible because we were all phoning into a common conference line. But the one that came up, it was actually brought to my attention by a witness, was in states or jurisdictions where a notarization of a record is required. That's probably not something that the witness is going to be able to do. And it is a good idea to come to a stipulation. I mean, we did it at the end. And, the opposing counsel and us are all professionals and we were all in the same boat. So we were making general accommodations, but the idea that everybody would agree to accept a signed copy of the deposition instead of a notarized copy of the deposition was one we put on the record. Beyond that, I think the standard admonitions were adequate.
To piggyback off Ben's, when I started the deposition, I asked everyone to state their appearance, which may sound a little bit silly, but when you're in an actual conference room, you can physically see who's there. And I had a couple instances where with the minors specifically, a parent would be sitting next to them, but not be in the video screen. So I think that's important to put on the record who all is actually there, even if they're not speaking in any capacity. So that was kind of what we started with, and the court reporter prompted me to do that with my first deposition. So that just kind of became a habit moving forward. And then I just put on the record that, the current situation. I asked the witness and opposing counsel, I said in light of the current stay-at-home orders, I asked that everyone agree on the record that they're okay proceeding with the video conference deposition. What I didn't want to happen was there was some, we have more clarity now, but before, when this all went into effect and we quickly transitioned to the video depositions, I wasn't 100% confident that, opposing counsel wouldn't put up a fight later saying, these weren't conducted properly, or, the witness thought that they had to do it via video conference as noticed instead of in the conference room. So getting everyone's agreement that they were okay moving forward in this format made me feel better and more confident about taking it. And then also that everyone was in an agreement that the court reporter could swear in the witness remotely. I think before the court reporter had to physically be with the deponent, but getting that agreement on the record made me feel more confident about taking the video deposition.
Great. And Monica, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
I didn't change really any of the typical admonitions. I wish I had, listening to Lauren and Ben. I wish I had brought up the whole mute yourself if you're not the witness answering questions or the person asking questions, because I think that would have helped a lot. A lot of people aren't too used to having to mute themselves if they're using a cell phone. So, I don't have anything to add, but I will take everyone's hints into consideration for future Zoom depos, as I'm sure we're going to have.
And I'll kind of add to that, if you do mute yourselves, remember to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or object. And that's where kind of the court reporter is going to come in and kind of guide you. Usually the universal sign is, meaning can't hear you, or they'll do this, meaning I'm not getting that. So maybe look for your cues. And Ben, and well, all of you actually probably gotten a little bit of guidance from the court reporters about how they're going to need to get the question again, or I didn't hear the answer or the objection. So just kind of be aware, if you are going to mute yourselves, you would have to then unmute yourselves to be heard.
The court reporter was good about speaking up when she couldn't, like you said, Mike, understand something. And then likewise, if we couldn't hear someone, is as foolproof as we're trying to make this whole process, things do go awry. So I had one witness who was trying to use an external microphone. He didn't have a built-in microphone in his, and he was trying to use a Chromebook or something. And having the technological support in the background during the deposition was great. So I just speak up and say, I can't hear the witness, could we do a mic check? And then Mike or Ryan or whoever from Aptus was able to cue back in right away and solve it within 30 seconds. And we were all just quiet, so the record wasn't jumbled, and we weren't putting stuff on the record when we didn't need to, but it was helpful to have Aptus jump in from the background and take care of it. And then we just moved on and continued with the depo.
That's great. Thank you so much for all of your feedback. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. It's 1:40, so before I open it up for Q&A, I'd like to just get one piece of advice from each of you that you would like to pass on to people that are watching and considering taking a remote depo. Again, I think all of us were hopeful that the restrictions would be a lot shorter than they actually are. So if you have just one piece of advice that you could lend to everyone watching, please share that with us. And if you could start with, I'd like to start with Monica.
I would say just make sure you test your video and audio maybe 15 minutes before you're scheduled to go on, because you never know when you're going to run into some last-minute internet connectivity issue.
That's reasonable and fair. Lauren, how about you?
I think in deciding whether to move forward with the video conference depo or not, my piece of advice would be just to open up the communication with opposing counsel and or the third party witness and get everyone in agreement before trying to force it. When I put forward the offer to opposing counsel, he sent me back a laundry list of like 12 questions. How are you going to swear in the witness? How is this going to work? Why are we even doing this? Why are we doing? And I said, I was similar to Ben in that I had asked for a continuance, and the judge basically gave me a little one and said, show me how much you can get done in this time. So kind of like what Ben was saying before, I was pushing to get them done and show the judge that I did everything that I could to move the case forward for the court and my client during the time. But I think that it wouldn't have happened without the agreement of opposing counsel coming to the table and saying, okay, yes, I answered his questions. This is how I plan to handle this. This is how I plan to handle swearing in the witness. And I think you'll feel much more comfortable with the whole situation if you do the run through with Aptus. And that's really what turned him around to agreement. So I think having that conversation and getting everyone on the same page and moving in the same direction was critical. I wouldn't have done it without that agreement.
Great. And Ben, if you'd like to offer the final piece of advice before we move to Q&A.
Sure. I have I guess two small ones. One is be sensitive to time zones. We are on the West Coast. We have witnesses coming up who might be in Europe, and that's something you might want to think about logistically when exactly the deposition is going to be taking place. Now, that's not really an issue if all of your witnesses are relatively local. But the second one is more broad, and it's you need to prepare. It's not harder, or it is a little bit harder. I think it is a functional equivalent to live if you are prepared. And that's, generally following up on what Monica and Lauren were saying. You need to know what platform you're using and how to use it so that you can effectively use it. If you just show up on the day and expect to be able to run the deposition, you're going to run into more problems than you expect. So build in a little bit of extra time to prepare and understand the platform, and then it should be fine.
Yes,
Great.
from a technical standpoint, please do that. We would appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Monica and Lauren and Ben, for your time. Again, we really appreciate it, and we hope that we've provided some valuable information to people that are considering taking remote depositions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike so that he can lead us with some questions and answers that might have come in while we were discussing all the topics.
Sure. One that's coming up, and this is coming up a lot actually, is in terms of communicating if your client should want to join the remote deposition as well. How would you communicate with them without being heard on the record? And Lauren and Monica, I don't believe, if your clients were not actually present within the deposition, but Ben, while your client may not have been in the remote deposition, some of your team members were, and you using live litigation, we'll start with that. Live litigation does have a private chat feature where I assigned Ben and his team to a particular group, and they were able to communicate via chat function. Either he could send it to everybody that was on his team, or they could communicate one-on-one. Did you take advantage of that feature, Ben, or did anybody on your team take advantage of that?
No, I mean, we practiced it in case we needed to, but it's the same, kind of the same note when I was a younger lawyer and I would attend depositions and I'd pass Post-its to the senior lawyer taking the deposition. I learned pretty quickly, they said, stop it. It talked to me at the break, but in the middle of the deposition, just getting notes is not really helpful and they're probably going to be ignored. So it's possible, it's functional, but I think everybody is a little bit suspicious of it. And if you're trying to communicate with the person actually taking the deposition, it's probably not going to work. Not as a function of the chat feature, just as a function of the reality of deposition taking.
So if you went off the record, would you just maybe mute your microphone and your camera and have, would you email them or text them outside when the deposition is not going on?
Right, or call them. I mean, the same thing you might do in a normal deposition during a break. You might call the other people on your team and say, hey, this is as far as I got. I think it might take this much longer, or ask for advice or kind of feedback. The normal things you'd be doing, the person's not in the room. And in my experience, when I'm traveling for depositions, nobody in my team is in the room anyway. So it's not so different from a normal deposition in that capacity.
And I'll add that we are actually, Zoom has it's a virtual breakout room feature. So if I wanted to, let's say Monica was the attorney in this instance and Lauren was her client, through Zoom, we could create a virtual breakout room where I could place the two of them in their own virtual breakout room separate from the actual Zoom meeting, but it would still not disconnect them. They just want to be broadcasting to anybody. So that's something we've been doing a lot of lately. So it does have that feature in terms of communicating with your team and your client should they want to attend. And Ben, this one's actually might be for you and Monica too, with the amount of exhibits or the exhibits that you've produced or you've been showing. Does the witness have the ability, if you need them to draw on something or mark something, have you taken advantage of the annotation features in both the Zoom and the live litigation platform? Oh, sorry, throw it out to Ben first, sorry.
Right. I don't think in the live litigation platform, the witness has the ability to annotate. I will have the ability to annotate, so I can annotate what the witness is saying. I haven't marked up exhibits for the record to be submitted as a marked up exhibit, but I've highlighted sections to direct the witness's attention to them while I'm talking about it, and then, left the exhibit alone.
Sure.
That's my experience.
Mike, how about you? I know you use the screen sharing feature. Have you had the chance to use the annotation features, or had given the witness the ability to annotate any of the documents that you've shown?
I didn't give the witnesses the ability to annotate, but I was intending to use the highlighting and underlining feature. I didn't end up doing it just because when I asked them quickly if they could see my cursor kind of moving in a circle around certain parts, they said yes, and they could follow me along really easily as I was scrolling through documents as well. So I didn't end up using it. I don't think I really needed it. They seemed to be able to follow me along perfectly fine without any lags.
And Lauren, not to leave you out, of course, but I don't think you've produced that many exhibits with the screen sharing feature. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Okay. I think we've had just a couple questions, just kind of reiterate. You were able to show documents without necessarily having to send exhibits to opposing counsel or the witness ahead of time. You have been able to do that and show it without producing it ahead of time. You've given them to Aptus, of course, just so we had a record and we could also help and step in if we needed to. But you are able to, in fact, conduct a deposition without having to produce everything or send everything ahead of time. Is that accurate? We'll start with Monica.
Yeah, that was accurate.
And Ben, how about you?
Yeah, on live litigation, the reason I picked it is because the document function was integrated into it, as I said before. So it allows you to upload then at any time before the deposition, anything you want to use into your own personal folder. And then at the moment you want to use it, you can share it with the room. It's similar to a deposition in which you have a box full of files that are your files. And then when you're ready to pull them up, that was really important to me because I did not want to give the whole binder of exhibits to the witness. Not for any, strategic, obviously for strategic reasons, but basically I wanted to make sure that I wanted to have it mirror a live deposition as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And because that's my experience and that's how I have learned to take depositions. And so that did it for me. I think eDepose and the document plane platforms also have that function. I think if you're using a remote deposition platform that has document capacity, everyone I've seen has that kind of built in because anybody who's using documents remotely is going to want to be able to have control over the documents. I'm less familiar with Zoom, and I think Zoom generally is not a little newer to the deposition game with respect to documents, and so I would defer to Mike and Jaclyn about what exactly Zoom can do. But in general, if you're going to be going through a platform, it will probably allow you to do it. You just need to learn how to do it, right?
That's a fair point. Yeah, it just depends on what you want to present. Like you chose live litigation, Ben, because it was what you needed it to do. And that's why a lot of our clients, they choose either a platform like that or they choose Zoom because it has the capability to have a virtual breakout room, or they have its native documents in terms of Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. They need to have that functionality to share their screen and navigate around using the functionality of that particular software and be able to send it on the fly to everybody that's participating in the deposition. So, that's why we kind of do demos, or we're demoing several different platforms to be flexible. That's when we first started doing this. While Zoom, is our primary platform, we have the flexibility to learn some other platforms to make sure we can help facilitate what type of deposition and what kind of documents you may need to present.
I would just follow up. If I didn't have documents, if I was talking about, a tort precipient witness, I would probably use Zoom because witnesses have comfortability with it these days. Opposing counsel, everybody knows. And the first question I always get when I say that I'd like to take a deposition remotely is, so like on Zoom or something. So we're going to do a Zoom deposition. And so if I didn't have documents, I would probably use Zoom because you're just talking to the person. And everybody, not everybody, but it's probably much more likely that people have set up their computer to function with Zoom than with live litigation or Flash or whatever you're going to be using.
Sure.
But I haven't had that opportunity yet. So,
with when the deposition ends, are the court reporters, are they sometimes verifying that they do have all the exhibits? Are they asking you, we got this exhibit, or is it kind of just, I guess I will say business as usual when you conduct these, like, okay, that's it, and everybody just says goodbye and logs off? Or are the court reporters taking some extra time to make sure they have everything that they needed? And I guess I'll open that up. I'll start with Lauren actually this time.
Yeah, that was something that was different about taking a deposition in person. The court reporter asked during the first deposition we took together, the court reporter had said, whoa, no one leave, because it's easy to just cancel out of the window and be gone. And then after the first one, I made sure when we were giving the stipulation at the end that I asked everyone to stay on. The court reporter, wanted spelling of names and to confirm email addresses, since transcripts are being sent electronically and not in hard copy now. So we needed, it was a third party witness, so we needed the email address for him or her, and just some other things to clean up the records. The court reporter really appreciated that we all stayed on for like 5 to 10 minutes after the deposition just to clean some stuff up, and people didn't close out of the window.
Monica, how about your experience? Maybe more, since if you presented exhibits, did the court reporter maybe also confirm that they had all the exhibits, or was that something that wasn't done in that particular instance?
Yeah, she did confirm at the end. I had 2 in one day, but they were husband and wife, so it was pretty easy. They just kind of switched out of the same chair, and at the end of the second deposition, the court reporter verified that she had all of them for both witnesses, but it only took a couple minutes. And then I think she might have verified everyone's email addresses. I can't remember, but she had them previously from conducting the demo with everyone. So it didn't really take much more time at all.
And then we know with live litigation, just if nobody's familiar with the platform, once you submit the exhibit and mark it, it goes into a submitted folder. So the reporter is able to simply go in and download all the exhibits from there. Has there been any follow-up with you, Ben, from the reporter about not having the exhibits?
Not really. I mean, because I check the exhibits periodically to make sure that I've properly submitted everything. But once it's been submitted, it's there. So even if the reporter missed something or is looking for something, he or she can always go back on and pull it. Yeah, I haven't had any issue with that.
Okay. Well, great. That kind of that clears out our Q&A, and we have about 5 minutes left. So if you want to take a quick minute, anything else you guys want to add or tell us about? We'll start with Lauren, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
I think the only thing that maybe we touched on it, but once you have everybody in agreement to move forward with the video conference deposition, to really work with the court reporter, the Aptus, to confirm that everyone has had their internet test and their Zoom or platform run through. There were a couple of depositions we were scheduling several at a time. So there were a couple where we set them a week out, and I had asked the witness to please connect with Aptus to do a trial run, and they hadn't, but Aptus was good about following up with them. And I think everyone just felt much more comfortable after doing that run through, which is a service that I would highly recommend every attorney taking advantage of, so that everyone's ready to go, and kind of put that on Aptus's plate so that you don't have to be the one in charge. Okay, everyone knows how to work Zoom, right? Everyone knows what link to use. It was nice to put that on Aptus's plate and make sure that it was done before the deposition started.
Happy to help. Thank you. Monica, how about you?
I think one thing that I wish I had taken advantage of earlier was just using the demo and making that readily available to all the attorneys that I've been dealing with lately. I think when I originally asked lots of attorneys if they wanted to move forward with depositions via Zoom, a lot of people just wouldn't reply, and they would just kind of wait and see what was happening with the shelter in place order. But I think if at the very beginning, if I said, by the way, someone from Aptus can send you a link to a demo right now so that you can see what it looks like, that would have sped things along really quickly at the beginning. So I think using the demo as a way to kind of persuade the other attorney that it is easy, especially if there's someone who isn't very tech savvy or is kind of adverse to a lot of this kind of technology, then that can really help, because it's a quick 3-minute, maybe less if they if everyone is participating in on time. It's a quick 3-minute thing, and I think a few of my cases would have benefited from just offering that earlier, and that's my bad because I didn't know about it and I was just waiting to see if they would reply, and I would follow up with them. I think just kind of being happy that the cases would kind of sit dormant for a while, and obviously that's not what a lot of us want.
Right. Dan, how about you?
I have to admit, I forgot the question, but I will leave on a comment. I think after, to be honest, I think I would go back to live depositions afterwards, at least at this point, even if I became incredibly proficient, not because I dislike video depositions, but because I'm much more comfortable with them. On the other hand, right now, I don't have a choice, and we don't have a choice. And so between taking a video deposition and taking no deposition, video deposition is preferable for me easily, no question. If we return back to a normal, everyone can travel, everyone has no issues being in the same conference room and whatnot, I think most of my depositions, I use the video depositions as a proxy for live depositions as opposed to as a transition to a totally virtual practice. And I could see it used either way. Right now I'm using them as a proxy, and I might return. I might, on the other hand, I might conduct more depositions virtually in the future because I'm more comfortable with the software.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lauren and Monica and Ben. I think we're right at 2 o'clock, so I think it's a good place to stop. Thank you to all of our viewers for joining us this afternoon. I believe a link will go out tomorrow with a recording of this video. And if you have any questions or comments or feedback, Mike will be putting up some contact information for you as we exit this afternoon. So again, thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us and helping us, provide experiences to attorneys that are considering this. We really appreciate it.
Of course, good luck to everybody taking them.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Cool. Are we still on?
I'll leave this up for just a couple more minutes, but feel free to log off, Ben.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.